On the subject of things like Judges Scientific, although not quite like Judges Scientific, another kind of scientific instrument outfit, in this case precision measuring equipment, company called Spectris on the FTSE 250 that I'm not sure we've talked about before on this show, but I'd heard of and thought about in some other context, and you've seen at work, Steve. So they are up about 16% or so when I looked at them. Oh, no, sorry, they're up 10% today when I had a look at them, taking them down to a mere 16% down over the last 12 months. They've been falling quite a bit for a company that has a pretty good record and I don't think is in necessarily terrible trouble. So, yeah, precision measuring equipment. They're a bunch of different organizations. They've spun off one in the last year or so and looking to acquire again. They do things like measure the size of particles, test contamination levels, analyze the properties of materials, all kinds of difficult technical things. It creates something of a barrier to entry, sells into semiconductor manufacturing, aerospace, pharma, auto industry, measure things like vibrational frequency, apparently, in your line of work, Steve. So I hadn't actually seen that from what I was looking at here. But they are up 10% on their latest report. They're guiding for a fairly sort of decent operating profit, and they seem to be getting things back on track. They're another example of an organisation that reported a bad half a year in what they call the first half of the year, their most recent update. And they reported an 8% sales drop back then, but there were a couple of things going on there. One was they had orders pushed back a little bit. Their overall order book was up 3%. And they were also being slowed up a bit by two things. One was they put a new payment processing system in, which meant that their revenue recognition got delayed, and that's partly why their sales were down. And another is that there is real falling away demand in China, which is 17% of their total revenues, which is not nothing, but also not all of it by any means. This is not a China-only business. This is not like sort of Burberry or something. And the stock was down 29% overall as a result of that. Latest update's a bit more positive, perhaps unsurprisingly, and the stock is now trading at a PE of around 11, and it's a dividend aristocrat, Steve, unlike Judges Scientific. Judges Scientific is a future dividend aristocrat, but Spectris, current dividend aristocrat. See what we think of this, I guess. Reasonably positive sort of update. Things looking a bit more encouraging.
I don't know an awful lot about this company. I have seen their name on some vibration reports for some floor joists that I was either specifying or they were on a specification for it, because my understanding is that they test for vibration in floor joists. So there's when you put in a floor on a building, one of the things you test for is how uncomfortable the floor feels underfoot and whether it's vibrating or bouncing. That will feel weird for the people who walk in it. Will feel like unsteady, and there's certain frequencies as well that you can hear, which we try and design out, so especially for the people below it, because you don't really want to be hearing people running around on the floor upstairs if you can avoid it. And I'm fairly certain I've seen their data come up, but I had no idea they were a public company. I had no idea they were as big as they were. Actually, quite an interesting company, Steve. They do a lot of testing equipment across various industries. About 3 billion in market cap. Been a decent performer over the years as well, Steve. Up about 4,280% since they listed, although admittedly that was back in, it looks like 1988. But maybe that is just how far Google's data goes back. But yeah, if you'd have held it since then, you're onto a major winner. Yeah, I don't know a lot about it, Steve, but I'm actually quite interested in this. How come it isn't in the BritBox, Steve? Why did you miss it out?
Well, I missed it out for the following reason. I was trying to assess I can see two main kind of issues that have been weighing on them over the last year or so. One is the just delay to stuff, which doesn't really worry me, if I'm honest with you. The other is their heavy exposure to China, 17% of sales. I don't know how that translates into profits, because they don't break this out anywhere that I can see. I had a look through their annual report. They break it down by sales and geography, and you could assume the margins are the same everywhere, but that looks like a sort of reasonably bold assumption. I wonder whether their Chinese margins might be sort of slightly wider than elsewhere, but they're guiding for 183 to 201 million operating profit, I think, on your sort of 3 billion market cap, which takes you to 15 or so, something like that, times. But that's the main reason I hadn't got around to buying this myself, and therefore not looking at it in BritBox. But it does have a fair bit in common with companies that we tend to like. We can talk about this in a bit more depth in the future, potentially. You've been watching a segment from the Playing FTSE show, brought to you in association with our favourite broker, Trading 212. For the full version of the show, check us out on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you open a new account with Trading 212 using the link in the description, there's a free fractional share in it for you. Just make sure that you use the code FTSE when you sign up. Terms and conditions apply, and do remember that when investing, your capital is at risk.